Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're so excited to see so many of you. Thanks for taking time to join us today. I'm going to just give everybody a few seconds to get settled, and then I'll kick us off. But I know folks are joining in from the waiting room. Okay. Well, hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining today's May Ask Me Anything event. We have some incredible AANHPI Trailblazers who have been elected to office here to share their wisdom with you today. And we're so glad to see so many new and returning faces. If you don't know me yet, hi, I'm Allison Senanaika. I use she, her pronouns, and I am our Associate Director of Strategic Partnerships here at NDTC. And I get the joy of moderating this panel today with these wonderful elected officials. So um, if you are just joining, please throw your name and pronouns in the chat if you'd like to share and where you're joining in from. I get the pleasure of joining in from a very rainy and cold Chicago this week. So it's nice to see all of your bright, sunny faces. But before we get started, just want to give a quick intro about NDTC if you are new to us. We are the National Democratic Training Committee. We are how Democrats like you run for office and get free training and resources from places all over the country to make long-term change. And thank you all for putting some intros in the chat. I see Kiani coming in from Massachusetts, Mary in Arkansas, and you really understand the rain. We're hopefully on the other side of it. And before we actually turn it over to our wonderful panelists and get started here today, just a couple of really quick virtual training norms. One, we want to make sure that you all are respectful, present, and asking questions and participating. We have some incredible speakers here today, and I want to make sure that we ask them all of the questions, those burning questions that you may have. Finally, live captioning is available today. If you want to go ahead and click to that menu bar at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to click live transcript and then click show subtitle, and then you'll be able to get that in real time, which is super helpful. And then the last component is we would be remiss without saying thank you so much to Jen. She is our lead staffer from our product and tech team here at NDTC, who is making sure everything runs super smoothly today. And so the only other thing is we are going to be dropping some resources from our website, traindemocrats.org, where if you make a free account and sign up, you can have access to all of that information and keep your learning journey moving with NDTC. So without further ado, I want to introduce our panelists, and they will show up on your screen momentarily. But we are so incredibly lucky to have all of them today and to hear more about what it's like to run for office, especially as an AANHPI person. So panelists, I will let you introduce yourself, and then we will get started. But bringing the sunshine from Hawaii, Representative Iwamoto, if you want to introduce yourself first, please.
Well, thank you so much, Allison, and NDTC. I'm Kim Koko Iwamoto. I'm a state representative from Hawaii. I represent the urban core of Honolulu, which is referred to as Ala Moana, Paka'ako, and then the downtown Honolulu area. I ran 3 times against my opponents to I just finished my first term in office as a state representative. Prior to that, I had been elected to the State Board of Education when it was when it was an elected position. It has since become an appointed position. I'm not sure if we're going to keep the introduction short, Allison, and yeah.
Say whatever you'd like. We can get into it. I want everyone to know who you are. Yeah.
Okay, so in 2006, when I got elected to the State Board of Education, it was my first campaign, and there were 16 people running for the at-large seat, and I had to make it be in the top 6 to make it through the primary, and then in the top 3 to make it onto the board. And we were able to do that just there at always at the bottom of the list, but we made it through. And when that happened, I think I became I openly trans, and so I became the highest elected person, whatever, who openly ran as trans, to get elected to not just Hawaii, to a statewide body, but not just in Hawaii, but the nation. So that was very exciting, I think, for Hawaii. we've always been very progressive in terms of identity politics. And anyway, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Well, Kim Coco, we're thrilled to have you, and thank you so much for that introduction. Representative Long Tran, I will pass it over to you to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Long Tran from Atlanta, Georgia. I represent Northern Atlanta. I have three cities in my district, Dunwoody, Doraville, Chamblee. I was first elected in 2022 and then won my re-election last year in 2024. And the way I ran my campaign was a little bit unconventional. For years, people had been asking me to run, and I had always said no. And when the Atlanta spa shootings happened in 2021, those calls became higher. And my predecessor decided to retire. And so I said, okay, I will consider it. And um, I ended up winning the election and was the first minority to win any seat in my district, whether it's a school board seat, a city council seat. And it sounds strange for Georgia, but we still have these areas that are very predominantly white elected officials.
Absolutely. Well, Representative Tran, we are honored to have you on today. So Long, thank you so much for being here. And then we should have Councilmember Mario Benavente. If you'd like to introduce yourself and come on camera, we'll pin you. Should be on the Zoom. Okay.
Hey,
Might be.
hello. Can everyone hear me
Oh,
all right?
there you go. We can hear you. Hi, welcome.
Thanks so much, y'all. Appreciate y'all being so patient. I got to hear everything that Kim and Long said. I was just finishing up a single vote. We're having a big budget meeting today in Fayetteville, North Carolina, our city council. My name is Mario Benavente. My mother's from Korea. My dad's from Peru. I'm proud to say that the first Korean American elected to office in North Carolina, actually, and certainly in the city of Fayetteville. In my second term as a city councilman, I won my first election with a landslide victory of 6 votes. And, it's something that I know that our local North Carolina Asian Americans Together is a nonprofit locally in the state of North Carolina that has been able to share the importance of the Asian American vote because it absolutely made the difference in our local races that, again, can be decided by, a small handful, in my case, just 6. It's been a really great opportunity. Fayetteville is right next to Fort Bragg. We've got a very, very diverse community of folks from all over. The Army is what brought my family here as well. And we've been business owners. We've been longstanding members of the religious community and beyond. And it's about time that we had some power in the decision-making process as well. So I'm really excited just to be in a position to always let our communities know to exercise the power that we clearly have in all of the ways, not just in business, not just in the community, on the food scene, right? There's so many ways that we're already on the tip of the spear, on the cutting edge. We should also be the ones standing up for minority communities and immigrant.
Uh-oh.
Mario, I think your internet cut out, so we're going to come back to you in just a second. But thank you so much for joining us. Well, everyone, these are
I
our
think I'm
three
seeing people
wonderful.
freeze, so I don't know, maybe I've
Oh, sorry. Um, we have you back. Why don't you finish your intro and then we'll go to the first question. Sorry about that. I think there might be a lag on your end.
Yeah, I think we lost him again.
Okay, got it. Well, with that being said, Mario, thank you so much for joining us here today. We are thrilled that we have 3 amazing panelists from truly all over the United States bringing some wisdom to these learners on the call today. So I'm always happy to see people joining in from all over the place. So thank you all so much for being here. And let's go into our first question. So when did you know for sure that running for office was the right choice? It sounds like you all came to different decisions and all of that. So how did you know it was the right decision? And what were the first 3 things you did to get your campaign off the ground? I'm going to go to you, Representative Tran, first.
Sure. So I'll be honest, I never knew if it was the right decision. And even months into my first term, I didn't quite know if it was the right decision. Now I know 100% it was the right decision. But the first thing I did was because I'd had so many people reached out to me over the years to run for various offices. I reached out to them and said, hey, I've been asked, and with what happened with the Atlanta spa shooting, I am now considering running. What is your support for me running as a state rep in the area? And would you be willing to reach out to others, your friends, your neighbors, and get their opinion on what they think about me running for state rep? And that really guided my first steps into running for office.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting that community buy-in,
Yes.
making something out of tragedy and all of that. I really hear that as a common starting point, unfortunately, right? And
Yeah.
in the narrative of running for office. Representative Iwamoto, what made you want to run for office in Hawaii?
Thank you. Yes, so I was a foster parent at the time, a licensed therapeutic foster parent, and my foster kids were all. I mean, I did because I was a single parent. I had one young person at a time, but I was part of a larger LGBT community, and so all of my foster kids were in the foster care system and openly identified as actually either gay or bi or and or trans, and so they were all enrolled in the public school system as well. And so I basically they asked me to testify at the Board of Education about the bullying they were experiencing. So it was very organic, and so I went as a foster parent, and my expressing my concerns. And I basically saw non-responsive faces on the other side of the table, and I'm like, this isn't acceptable. There's no even acknowledgement that they have a fiduciary duty to keep my kids safe, and every kid safe in the schools. So I went to my community. I'm like, do you think we should try to get a seat at that table? And then I checked after checking with the community. Then I checked with the people who knew me best to say, is this crazy? I mean, I've never done this. I've never volunteered on a campaign. I don't think I donated to a campaign at that point. So it was, and this is again in 2006. So it was all new to me. And again, checking in with my very close friends, like if it was just a decision that was above my, like that I was just being naive. And so we said, let's do it. None of us actually worked on campaigns. So let's just have fun. And so that was our core mission, was to have fun. And I think we're all creatives to a certain extent. And so, designing logos and, all of that, marketing, the taglines, the drafting of mailers, that was very exciting for us. So that was the start.
Amazing. And running for office is such a personal decision, right? And getting buy-in from your community sounds like such a common through line for all three of you. And Mario, I feel like you spoke to that a little bit in the beginning. So tell us more about how you made the decision to run and how you got your community's support.
Yeah, it was a confluence of, I think, national factors in an interesting way. A lot of people don't know, but George Floyd, that his being killed in Minnesota, had such an impact on everyone across the country. Probably because we were all stuck inside watching TV because it was COVID, and we were kind of forced to see that in a way that previous incidences of police brutality just weren't highlighted in the same way. And a lot of folks don't know that George Floyd was actually from Fayetteville. His family is actually still here in the area. And so it had a unique impact on us. I was at law school at the time, still in my third year. And because of COVID, we were on Zoom School of Law because we all got sent home. And so I was back in Fayetteville, still, doing classes during the day. But because of some of the activism that I was participating in, we ended up occupying uh, area at the center of our downtown for 5 days, 24 hours, trying to bring awareness to issues of public safety reform, some, 8 Can't Wait. I'm sure you guys have heard of those, and some additional key investments into, underprivileged areas that deserve more support. And basically, we wanted more than just the more than just the performative gestures that a lot of, I think, local communities were had those things too, but we wanted to see the actual, policy change as well. And when that didn't happen, a lot of criticism is sometimes levied against activists for marching to the streets but not marching to the polls. That cannot be said about Fayetteville, North Carolina, because all those folks that came and organized then became a part of our campaign. And so we knocked out an incumbent. And I'm proud to say that since I've been on city council, we've instituted an Office of Community Safety so that when people call 911, there will be an alternate response for folks who are dealing with mental health, substance abuse, or abject poverty. That is not necessarily just the police that are coming, if it's not appropriate, obviously. But those are kinds of policies that, we were putting up signs about and demanding change for. And when our city council wasn't listening to us, coming to the public forums and making all these demands, luckily the people in the community were like, well, those are great ideas. Well, who if not you can kind of, or we kind of drew straws to some extent. I was in a position to kind of put my name on the ballot, but it had a lot to do with just national issues that. Again, it seems really difficult oftentimes, especially now in 2025, we can't control those things that are so out of our scope. But what is the community version? What is the local version where you can kind of protect or preserve against that, those kinds of issues from happening locally? And that's always going to be my big message to all of y'all is that the more you guys get involved, maybe some of the frustration you feel about national politics, think about the ways that you could, take a hand on the steering wheel locally on that issue, because a little bit of that all over the place is what's going to make that national change.
Absolutely. And it sounds like for all of you, right, getting buy-in from your community and finding ways to come together to move policy forward, to think through how to take care of your community is a huge part of why you ran for office. And with that in mind, for this next question, I think often first-time candidates are intimidated because they are unfamiliar with the process, or otherwise. And so the idea of finding enough resources to power a campaign could be intimidating. So what advice would you give to those who may be considering a run for office, but have concerns about perhaps raising money or recruiting volunteers? And if any one of you three want to take that first, we can go around the horn.
I'll go ahead and go. So, like I said before, I ran kind of an unconventional campaign. On average in Georgia, to run a state rep campaign, especially in an open seat, or if you're trying to flip the seat, you're looking at $150,000 to $250,000. I raised about $20,000, and I will preface that this was 2022, and inflation was a big deal. And I had so many of my neighbors just like, we're so sick of getting mailers. We don't look at them. We just get them and go straight in the trash. And so I focused more on ground roots, or grassroots rather. I mapped out all of the voting precincts, and then I looked at all of the neighborhood swim clubs that are in those precincts. And I would ask friends and family to help me set up meetings within those swim club HOAs within those neighborhood precincts and make those initial connections, right? And after I built kind of a long list of folks I can email, my first email was just simply, if you cannot donate, then please give me your time. If you can't give me your time, please donate. And so that is how I opened up my fundraising, is to ask people, if you can't give money, give me your time. If you can't give me your time, give me money. But I built that connection of network first before going out to raise money.
Right, absolutely. And finding that people first connection, right?
Yes.
How can we work together to do that? Well, Councilmember Benavente, because you also live in sort of a red purple state at times, also blue, depending on where you are, sort of what wisdom would you have to share thinking about people running in redder districts or areas?
For sure. Well, one thing I really liked about what Representative Tran just spoke about was that early effort, right? Even before you kind of really do the outfront political effort, some of the things that you can do, especially the local, I think, particularly city council wise, if that's something you're interested in, close your eyes and think to yourself, the second that I open them, I'm now the council member for my district. You are. Because there's so much work that can be done with or without the title, that you'd be surprised. And being able to participate in public forums is, just as well as being, on the dais at sometimes. And you can focus on the issues that are you're most passionate about. And that means going to community watches. That means going to community events, right? You can do all of that now. You would do that when you're elected, but there's literally nothing stopping you from organizing your neighborhood and your communities now. And just like Representative Tran said, when you do take that next step to be more formal about it, you know, it's not like you just showed up just for the election, right? You've already kind of been showing how you can do the work. It just makes sense now to give you the title, so you can do even more wonderful things. So, you know, I would definitely share that because, you know, when I was running, there was 5 people in my race, and when I made it out of the primary, all these assumptions were made about, oh, well, all these conservative voters, because there were some very, very conservative folks that were on the initial 5-person ballot, they're automatically going to go to the incumbent because everyone knows Mario is this big liberal and this big progressive, and so you might as well just add all those to them. I did better in those conservative neighborhoods than I did in my own areas, honestly, because you don't take anybody for granted, especially on the local level. They know what you tell them. They know, you know, when I would knock a door and say, these issues are most important to me, and these are the folks that I'll preface this too. I'm not sure if this is outside the scope, but voter data. You know, if there's one big hint that I'll give you, if you decide to be with a Democratic Party or another party, there is voter data that those parties make available to you. And you want to make sure that you take full advantage of that because in that very brief window of time that you're running for office, that 2 or 3 months from filing until election day, it's hard to really grow the electorate or to sign up a bunch of people to vote for the first time. You really got to go after the quote unquote super voters. And once you're elected, you can start to work on registering new people. But when I went to even a hard red, you know, a deep red neighborhood or house, they were super voters. I knew they were going to hit the ballot. I wanted them to at least know who I was, so they would consider me. And they would say, a Republican, a Democrat has never come to my house before. You're the first person who's ever come and knocked on my door and just had a conversation with me. So whether or not, especially on the local level, we're not talking about a lot of the really divisive stuff on the national level. We're talking about sidewalks, speed bumps, things that, you know, everyone can sort of, you know, get around. That's what we focused on. That's what we talked about. Wanting better, you know, opportunities for young people. You know, there was all these common ground that you have with neighbors who, despite their maybe party affiliation or what they would maybe scored as in a voter database, once they know you, that's who they want to vote for. And there's a great opportunity, especially at the council, commissioner, local level, where it's not as hyper partisan per se, the topics that we're talking about. So you have all the room in the world just to create a connection with somebody. And again, you might have met them at the community watch or at the local, you know, community event before that time period where you were canvassing. So they might already recognize you. So I hope that answers the question. I think I kind of went a few different places.
No, I love that, right? You're talking about a community-centered approach to running for office because that is such a crucial part of that. So, Kim Coco, what advice would you have thinking about first-time candidates wanting to run for office?
Right. I first want to acknowledge that raising money, asking people for money is the hardest thing to do. But it's great what Representative Tran said about inviting, like asking them for money, but then also giving them a way out and letting them volunteer if they can't give money. Another great thing is when you make your announcement that you're thinking about something on social media, all of your friend groups and everyone who's liking it, loving it, whatever, then you can go back to them and send them a direct message to be like, hey, I'm having a fun. Thank you so much for, you know, giving me thumbs up. Do you mind coming to my fundraiser or spreading the word? So we ended up with one of the largest volunteer databases that I was able to carry with me from 2006 to my more current campaigns. And my more recent campaign was again for state representative. And I actually ran against the House Speaker, who has been in the House for 30 years and Speaker, part of leadership, and then Speaker for 8 years. And so it was one of the, I think some groups were doing the data analysis, and it might have been the first time in US history that a sitting Speaker of the House was removed. And then 6 weeks after I took out our Speaker from the left, in Delaware, I think the Delaware candidate challenger took out the Speaker of the House in Delaware during the primary. But anyway, so it's really hard to fundraise against certain, if you're going against the establishment. So I'm not going to get any money from any establishment Democrats or anyone who wants to get any favors from the sitting Speaker of the House. So it was challenging. I did have to self-finance, but for me, I had a larger mission, which was to change. We had huge corruption scandals. 2 of our 76 legislators went to jail. federal prison for corruption, for pay-to-play politics. And so we have a lot of laws in place that allow for pay-to-play politics and to happen. And so, yeah, I was taking on all of that. So that's why I went against this current speaker, against the speaker at the time. And so, yeah, so it was different. Although I did have way more individual small dollar donations than obviously the speaker had. I did have to put in my own resources into winning it because, I mean, personally, I do a lot of investment in the community anyway, and so for me, what I was trying to shift in politics, but also in community, was to make sure government was more accessible to everyone. And not just the corporate donors or people who can give large amounts of money to the most powerful few people in government. So yeah, anyway, so that was part of the narrative. And so I did get a lot of small dollar donors and a lot of support from people who were just sick of the establishment.
It makes a ton of sense, right? And people want to feel like they have a voice in their politics. And I really think that at the state and local levels, we can really see how your voice is impacted as a voter. And it sounds like all three of you really bring a personal touch to your work, which is such an admirable and like wonderful thing for me to see working in this field. So thank you all for what you're doing. I also want to remind the audience, we have a Q&A box at the very bottom of your screen. We're going to get to questions in a little bit from the audience, and I'd love some from you all. So feel free to drop any questions there, and I'll get to them in just a moment. But moving into the next question, what is one persistent assumption or piece of conventional wisdom about motivating people to take political action that you'd encourage other candidates or party leaders to question? Mario, do you have an answer for that? It seems like you might want to start.
Well, I think this is a common theme for all three of us, again, that we were not afraid to take on incumbents. That, this assumption that you will one day be tapped by the establishment and that you will be given permission and you'll be given all these opportunities. And if you just be a good line tower, that someday it will come. I would question that. I would challenge that. I would not wait for the right ring to kiss before you decide for yourself and for your own supporters and for your own area to take the lead. I think it was a Malcolm X quote that said that power gives back or concedes to nothing except more power. And if it's not something that people are just going to give to you, sometimes you have to be willing to challenge it. And you'll find, I think, oftentimes is that, especially folks who've been in offices for decades plus, who are kind of very complacent, and I think, like Kim said, at times things can start to get a little corrupt, in those situations that people assume that their bark is basically where I'm saying that their bark is bigger than their bite. That when you actually challenge it, you actually see that actually you're not the only one who is ready for someone to stand up to that good old boy system, and that in fact everyone was just sort of waiting for the first one to stand up. And then there's actually an overwhelming majority that wants to see change. But someone's got to be that one to sort of be courageous enough to step forward. It could absolutely be members of, our community and the folks on this call, because in my opinion, you guys are already taking some courageous steps by participating in things like this. Some folks, they try not to think about these issues, but you guys are already ready to do that. So you've already got it in you to take the next step and be the ones to, give a voice, I think. And you'll never should feel like you've got to have, again, that anointment or someone has to knight you, the official anything. You do that for yourself and from your own area and for your own community. So I would always encourage you guys to find your guys' own, sort of gumption when it comes to that.
Absolutely. And as you think about, the AANHPI community, you have to bring your own chair to the table, right? Like you have to do this yourself sometimes. And I love sort of what you say about that, Mario. Long, what would you have to say about this question?
So I didn't run against an incumbent. I had an open seat. So it makes it a little bit easier. But when you're running for office, you have to treat your campaign as a mirror of how you're going to legislate or be an executive. And so if you're going to be on council or a state rep, how you navigate relationships is very key, and how you handle mistakes are very key. And so for me, as I introduced myself to my friends and families and neighbors, telling them that I'm considering running, I also asked them, is so-and-so considering running, or do you know someone who's considering running? And as I was told, well, there's this person considering it, I would go and meet them. That actually led me to not having a primary opponent. Um, I had met with people who said they'd been considering it because they knew my predecessor was going to retire and it didn't seem like anyone was willing to stand up. But they were happy that I was willing to stand up. So they decided to back off and support me. And yeah, I maintained that. Uh, I going into the general election, navigating this network of engaged voters in my district, I engaged with Republicans as well. I asked my Republican opponent to have lunch with me so that we can set some ground rules and know each other a little bit. You don't throw the same kind of punches once you know who your opponent is and you've sat down and broken bread together. But that voter database that the councilman was talking about earlier, I looked at who voted for Trump in 2016 and saw whether or not they voted again for Trump in 2020. And if they did not, I went and engaged with them because they were either probably like slightly leaning Republican or independent voters. And so doing that kind of established me as someone who is willing to talk and listen to both sides. And so very much so as you look for those who kind of, here in Georgia, your city council elections are nonpartisan. Your school board elections are nonpartisan. And so by that nature, there are people who are invested in what happens in city council and they really don't care about party. They don't bother with Republicans or Democrats. And so you figure out a way to, through talking to different people, getting to those who are very active in the local politics. And you just build out that network and build those bridges and relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kim Coco, thinking about your, running for office in Hawaii and thinking about your district in Honolulu, what sort of wisdom do you bring to the table around how you'd encourage candidates and party leaders, all that?
Right, and I really appreciated what Councilmember Benavente mentioned about not waiting to be invited to run, but actually saying, "Hey, our voice is missing from the table." The establishment isn't going to select. They weren't going to select me. In fact, an establishment congresswoman actually I told a group of people who were on the same panel. And she said, this is why we're changing the Constitution to make it from elected to appointed. And she was pointing at me because she was like, because we had an elected school board, this weirdo was able to get elected, and if it's an appointed board, we can pick and choose and get people who are more, who go along to get along. And so it's really interesting to see that kind of how catalytic I've been, in that sense, which is like challenging the status quo. And so in terms of being like Asian, that we are overrepresented in state and local government, just being Asian. I mean, compared to the other ethnic, racial demographics in Hawaii. But obviously, as an openly queer person, as a trans person, definitely, I would not have been the one selected to serve my district if I waited around for. So that's really important, and to connect beyond identity, whether it's even political party. I never. So I don't. The way our voter database is delivered to us, we don't know who's a Republican and who's a Democrat, let alone who they voted for. So I approached everyone as if they believed in similar things. And more importantly, I listened to what they had to say. And then for those people who did express any kind of issues with my identity or any of my identities, I basically tried to listen deeper into what they were concerned about. In fact, there was one situation where a voter called and left a voicemail. This is actually during COVID. Left a voicemail that was quite anti-trans and very, most people would not have called this person back. But I'm like, you know what? I'm going to call them back. And I was like, I couldn't hear your voice message, but my caller ID indicated that somebody called. And I'm like, so many people need help right now. They need access to food, or they're going to miss their rent payment. And I said, there are a lot of resources. What can I connect you to? And I'm like, are you struggling? Do you know anybody else who needs help? And just having that engagement around my role as an advocate, my role as a connector to services. By the end of our conversation, he said, oh my God, I'm so glad you didn't hear my message because it wasn't very nice. And having spoken to you, I would actually now vote for you. So, and that's the way we need to transcend all the time. Because quite frankly, if we waited around for that kind of the permission to move forward, we're never going to get it. We need to be able to identify the terms of our relationships with everyone, including people who are initially, against whatever you stand for. Again, I actually am one of the people. We only have 9 of the 51 representatives in our state house are Republicans, and they are often marginalized. And I'm the one who keeps trying to elevate their participation in our democratic process, at least within the House. And even if they're the ones, some of them are, introducing anti-trans bills. I'm like, but there are bills that we do connect on, and I'm more than happy to sign on to those bills to constantly show them that, let's work together on things that we agree on. Anyway.
Wow, Kim Coco, that's such a powerful story about how you connected with somebody who maybe originally had some vitriol in their comments. And I think that requires an immense amount of grace under pressure and all of that to really, rise above. So I just really appreciate that story. Well, sort of my last question before we move into audience questions is, we know the AANHPI community is not a monolith, right? We come from all different backgrounds, mixed backgrounds, and all of that. And so considering that, even though we have so many different identities, what are the unifying experiences that you feel can serve a basis for progressive political solidarity across our communities?
So I have this theory that, especially among Asian women candidates, education is something folks do not question. When they see a tiger mom talking about education, they believe that they know what they're talking about. And I can say my wife and my neighbors, they definitely know what they're talking about when it comes to education. So when we're fighting for public school funding, like we're losing public funding to charter schools here in Georgia. Every year they keep increasing that allotment for charter schools and reducing the public schools. Education, I think, within our AAPI community, as a male or female, our voice is very respected in that regard because we value education so much in our community. And so I think that is one area that we can definitely unify. The second is entrepreneurship. We're all small business owners in some way, whether it's a nail salon, a dry cleaner, a restaurant owner. Our community constantly is turning to entrepreneurship to pull itself out of poverty. And people see that every single day when they see a new restaurant open or a new nail salon. And so I think those are areas that we can be unified in our message and share those common goals.
Right. And when I think about my upbringing, I think the AANHPI community has such a sort of we're all going to take care of each other sort of energy. And I love seeing that in communities, whether it's education, right? Whether it's housing, anything like that. And so, Kim Coco, what would you say about this in your community? What's sort of a unifying message for you?
I guess, that we're not, well, for me, I feel like, even from being a young child and being the target of bullies, you just kind of are prepared to fight all the time. Yeah, I mean, like I am. Obviously, I have a lot of joy and I have a lot of fun fighting the fight, but there's a kind of a toughness, a not internalizing that's important, but also being justifiably enraged and angry and like harnessing that energy. There are a lot of people, especially right now, who are um, along the spectrum who, with all of the hits that we're experiencing from the federal government in terms of funding and everything, even the attack on DEI. I mean, imagine what that feels like in a place as diverse as Hawaii, where Native Hawaiians are being there's all there's so many identities and so many allyships. So for me, I'm like, I'm ready to fight. Like, let's, and so I hope. So anyway, that's kind of what I'm tapping into, and I'm sharing. Making sure that people know to find joy and self-care during this long battle, right? To pace themselves, but also to lean in, and not to operate from fear. And that's another thing too, this fear of, oh no, we shouldn't be too loudly against, somebody who's in power or somebody who's holding the purse strings. I always think about speaking to people's highest potential, confronting those in power and pleading to their higher selves. That holding that kind of optimism always, but also an optimism in terms of what we, the people, deserve from government. I think that's a common thing that people appreciate. So we don't want a corrupt government. We don't want a government that caters just to the wealthiest and largest corporations. Just there's a lot of people that messaging resonates with. And I think they do appreciate, I think a lot of people feel like the underdog, and so they want to make sure that there's that champion or somebody willing to remind everyone about why we're there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Mario, what would you say to close us out on this question?
Right. The way I'm interpreting the question, understanding the question is Asian Americans. I know that kind of a little bit what Representative Tran was saying, like we have this this Asian excellence that we always aspire to be. We have this higher standard that we always want to try and achieve. And I think about that in contrast to this really like almost formative article I read, I think for like in 2011 called Paper Tiger. And it talked about Asian Americans who are going to the best schools that are coming out of the best law schools, business schools, and whatnot. But we're not the partners in the law firms. We're not the CEOs of those Fortune 500s. Where we have this high ambition and achievement. It's not translated to then executive roles, and that there is this assumption that we're from a diminutive space or from a diminutive community that is looked at as workhorses but not the leaders. And I think about that often. I think about that often because I know that that's a shared experience that obviously women in the workplace honestly have their own version of that from, right, where their expectation is that you are allowed for these roles, but there's the glass ceiling. And I guess the term has been used, the bamboo ceiling, for Asian Americans, right? And so, you're going then into what Kim was talking about, then using some of that frustration from these realities, the sort of concoction that comes from this ambition and this ability, and sometimes the way that we're kind of kept at the lower level, we're building this sort of combustible, sort of energy. This, we can call it Han, I guess we say in the Korean community. I think there's other terms for it, or it's that fighting spirit that then kind of erupts from that reality, to then break through those ceilings, and again to stand up and say that actually we are allowed to want to be in leadership. We are allowed to be more than just looked at it in a particular sort of way that is sometimes emasculated, or looked at as second class or the perpetual foreigner, right? There's all of these different ways that Asian Americans are sort of from the jump have to these are our unique sort of challenges that we have to address, but every time that I've seen our members of our community stand up and work against those things and fight those things, we've been successful, like we always are. So I encourage everyone on this call to kind of take that attitude of you've seen all the ways that you've achieved despite those challenges that have been imposed upon you through no fault of your own, and you overcame them. So why not the next thing? You'll always, when you apply those kinds of principles, be successful in whatever you want to achieve, especially if it's elected office, an area that, again, you will surprise yourself at how successful you can be when you're ready to say that I'm ready for the fight, and you get into the ring. You follow the fundamentals, and I think a lot of that was shared today already. You will be successful.
Oh, I love that. That's such a wonderful way to sum up this final question. And really thinking about it, everybody has a place in this political work, and you do have power. And I think that is no different in the AANHPI community. And I think all three of you today have really just underscored that point over and over again. And by being in power as elected officials and making sure that you are doing right by your community. So I think that's huge. And I'm seeing some questions come in from the Q&A box. We're going to move over to those. And so I'm going to start with Kiani. Kiani, apologies if I'm mispronouncing anything. I'll do my best here. But as a Kanaka Maoli Native Hawaiian who has left Hawaii for new opportunities, is there a place for Hawaiian issues outside of the islands, or is that a challenge and fight Hawaii politicians have to make alone? Kim Cook, I want to start with you, given your oversight in Hawaii politics, and then get input from everyone else.
Okay, I apologize. I was reading some of the messages and I wasn't listening to your question. Can you rephrase it?
Yeah, of course. So, this person says that they had left Hawaii for new opportunities, but is there still a place for Hawaiian issues outside of the islands, or is that fight only for Hawaiian politicians?
Is there a place for, I don't know why I'm not understanding.
No, that's
Um, is that- yeah, sorry. I'm trying to look for the question, how it's written.
here. Let me
Um,
just put it in the chat for you, Kim Coco. But basically, like, if you are a Native Hawaiian person, your community still matters outside of the island that you occupy,
oh, absolutely.
right? So I sort of
Yes.
think that that's what they're trying to get at. But I'll let you go ahead.
Well, if I could just speak to the displacement of, of Native Hawaiians by settlers like myself. I mean, my family's been here for 5 generations, but we came as a tool of, monocropping industrial ag. We came to work in the sugarcane plantations, and we diluted the vote of the Kanak Maoli who were here before. And then when democracy was, that okay, now everyone's going to vote, and then all the oftentimes the rights and access to land, all of these decisions are made by the majority, or now Native Hawaiians are in the minority. So all of this constructed democracy has not served Native Hawaiians well. So, and every day, every year, more Native Hawaiians are leaving Hawaii. And so now there are more Native Hawaiians living outside of Hawaii. And it's because we've sold our land to the highest bidder. The Native Hawaiians have stewarded this land here in Hawaii so beautifully that everyone wants to buy a piece of paradise. And so we have investors from around the world paying top dollar. And our tax system here is ironically really low. So we have 70,000 empty homes throughout the state, and yet we have one of the highest homeless numbers per capita in the nation. So this disconnect. So we need to definitely make sure that and actually we have a constitutional mandate to fund organizations or agencies within the state that actually try to keep Native Hawaiians in Hawaii on Hawaiian land. So we definitely need to do more of that. We definitely need to put a check on this kind of commodification of land, and land purely as an investment by people who are out of state or of foreign nationals, to limit their investment or purchasing of this as a commodity, to make sure that more Native Hawaiians can return home, because land is obviously so important to culture and existence as a people.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for putting it that way. And if Long or Mario have anything to add here, please go ahead. But otherwise, I'll take it to the next question.
I'll add something real quickly because I talk about Hawaii often in Georgia because there's so many different impacts, especially um, after the damage to, and I can't believe I'm losing the name of the area. But
Lahaina.
Lahaina, thank you. There were a lot of Filipino workers that became displaced and they needed resources and they weren't talked about very much. And so, as a state rep in Georgia, we have a Filipino community, and they didn't understand that there was a Filipino community in Hawaii that needed support. And then I sit on the Natural Resources Committee. I'm also chair of our AAPI caucus here in Georgia. And so a lot of the environmental issues we discuss actually have a big impact on Hawaii, right? And so um, there's a place to always advocate for the original state that you lived in. But for us legislators here in America, we also, I think, bear a responsibility to talk about Hawaii because Hawaii is such a beautiful island. Um, and a lot of the things we decide here in the States can have negative consequences there.
Yeah. Including displacement and lack of natural resources and all of that. And I think
Yes.
it's such a through line. So it's interesting to hear that you're also experiencing that in Georgia and how you have a duty, right, to support everybody around the United States. I'm going to end with one final question coming in from Josh in the chat here, but what are some of the best ways to balance having a full-time job and trying to run a campaign? Let's do rapid fire 1-minute responses here as your last question before we close out. So how do you balance running for office and your other responsibilities? Mario,
So
let's go first. Yeah.
go ahead, Mari.
No, yeah, it can be very tough. I was in a privileged position because rather than studying for the bar exam like all my classmates, I decided to run for city council. So I ended up kind of putting that part of my professional life on the sidelines, and I kind of got to be a full-time campaign full-time that first summer. And real advice I would give to the topic is kind of going back to what I said previously about if you're, especially in the local city council level in particular, where I could have a little bit of a leg to stand on to speak on. You are right now the council person. Start going to the meetings. Start, following sort of their agenda on a given month and see if it fits with your lifestyle, right? Today I had to leave court and have some of my colleagues take over some of my cases because we had a budget meeting that started at 10 a.m. And it's still going on. I was a little bit late today even, so it can end up competing with a lot of priorities that you have. Kind of give yourself a little bit of a test run. Can you be, and again, this is unique for everyone's community. If your meetings start at 6 p.m., if they start at 7 p.m., if they have 2 p.m. work sessions like here in Fayetteville, we only meet 4 times a month technically, but there's all these committee meetings. If you're a part of, a smaller committee in between, then you want to go to your community watches and you want to go to all your events. So again, start actually acting and behaving and moving as if you were going to do that, and you'll start to see whether it's really something that is possible for you. And when it comes to the campaigning season, like I said, it's a 3-month kind of commitment. What you don't have in your own personal time, you want your volunteers, and sometimes you will want to pay those folks too. It's all about scale. So I want to make sure that in my last 20 seconds or less of this 1 minute, I put my contact information on the chat. Feel free to reach out if you guys want to ever talk more about the local municipal level stuff. I'm in a city of 200,000. We have our districts that are split between 9 districts, so we've got about 25,000 apiece. If that sounds similar to your area, and I can kind of just give you some insight on what worked for me, I'd be glad to talk with you guys offline about it.
Wonderful, Mario. Thank you. Long, let's go to you.
Yeah. I'm in a kind of a unique situation in that I'm a small business owner. But there was still a very large lead time that I gave myself. As soon as we could qualify, I mapped from that date to the election date what it's going to take and how much community engagement. And so whether you're talking to your employer about you running for office, which is a conversation you should actually have before you qualify, because they may not be okay with it. And then you'll have to have a make that tough decision, right? If you're going to quit your job to run or your employer is supportive. But you have to map everything out to election day. And I did that with my team. Said, you guys are going to have to absorb more of the responsibilities. I won't be able to be in the store, in the business as often, especially once we get 6 weeks out from election day, once early voting starts. That's my entire day. 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. is out meeting voters once early voting starts. And so talk to your employer and especially your family and let them know what you're mapping out for an election.
Yes, definitely your family. This is this is a joint effort in many ways. So, Kim Coco, what's your parting wisdom about balancing lifestyles and running for office? I think you might be muted.
Okay, yeah,
There you
there you go. So thank you. It's obviously about time management. So I actually have several companies as well that I run. But the biggest role that I have that takes up most of my time is as a single parent. I adopted, and so now I have a 12-year-old daughter. But over the years, so making sure I had all the aunties and uncles lined up to help me with childcare, that was the biggest pressure for me, especially because school ends around 4, and that's when I'm door knocking from 4 to 6, and that's when I'm supposed to be spending the most time with my daughter. So that was the hardest. Obviously, as she got older, she can come with me and we can spend more time on the campaign trail. And she did, and I was able to incorporate her, and she did get more excited about participating. But that's so it's all that balance. But when I speak to a lot of my colleagues who are running for office, they too had to speak to their employer about actually taking time off in a substantial way, especially leading up to the most crucial points in the campaign. For us, we have 100% mail-in ballot, mail-in voting. So, so leading up to that point when the ballots get dropped, but mapping it on a calendar in terms of what needs to happen, how much time is going to be put in. But yeah, there's a lot of work we do in the wee hours of the night and early past midnight, answering all those questionnaires, responding to emails, asking for donations via social media, all of that stuff that obviously volunteers can do, but there's a lot that we need to make to ask as a candidate.
Yes, absolutely. Well, everyone here, we are so glad that we had Kim Coco, Mario, and Long on today. We are so privileged in getting to hear your advice firsthand. And I hope for the many of you who are joining in today, thinking about staffing a campaign or running for office themselves, really feel empowered to do that. And if you need extra help along the way, NDTC has tons of resources at traindemocrats.org. So please do visit the website, make an account if you have not already. And I just want to, if you all can throw some love in the chat for our wonderful panelists today, we so appreciate the three of you joining us. And I would be remiss without ending to just say thank you very much to our many partners who make our work possible. North Carolina Asian Americans Together in Action has helped so many candidates in North Carolina, so just want to shout them out. South Asians for America, AAPI Victory Alliance, and Indian American Impact Fund. All four of them came together today to make sure that we could recruit folks to join this very important call. And so for all of you, if you have not already, Jen dropped a survey link in the chat. Please fill that out so we can make this programming even stronger and hear what you all want to learn more about. So to the three of you, thank you so much for being here today. We are absolutely thrilled and honored to have your time. So
You're
thank you.
welcome. And Mario, real quick, it's nice to see a fellow Southern Asian elected with a full facial beard.
Oh, I love that. Well, everyone have a wonderful day. I'm going to go ahead and close out this Zoom. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.